Welcome to The Art of Medicine, the program that explores the arts, business, and clinical aspects of the practice of medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Wilner. Today, I'm excited to speak with Jay Dicharry. Jay is a physical therapist known for his expertise in assisting endurance athletes recover from injury. He is also the author of the new book, Running Rewired. A couple of months ago, I had Joe Friel, an elite sports coach, on the show. We had a great discussion. That was episode 108 for those of you preparing for your next triathlon. A lot of Joe's strategy involves injury prevention, but putting out 100% can lead to injury. And I'm looking forward to Jay teaching us more about preventing, diagnosing, and treating sports-related injuries when they occur. But before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsor, locumstory.com. Maybe you're curious about locums and how it might fit into your career story, but do you know all the different reasons physicians choose locums and how it works for them? At locumstory.com, you can hear firsthand stories as diverse as physicians themselves. There's not one solution for everyone. The variety of opportunities might surprise you. Locum Story is an unbiased educational resource. It has tools that let you explore trends in your specialty and compare different locums agencies. There's even a simple quiz to see if locums is right for you. Do your own research at locumstory.com. It's easy. And now to my guest. Welcome, Jay Dicharry.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Wilner. Pleasure.
Jay, let's start with your training. What kind of medical background do you have as a physical therapist and sports specialist?
For sure. So I'm a PT by trade, right? So I'm an undergraduate in kinesiology and then got a master's in physical therapy back in 2001. I basically was treating patients in an outpatient sport and spine practice for about 5 years, which is nothing that should excite most people. But I think the interesting tangent my career took is that I wound up as the director of the Gait and Biomechanics Lab at University of Virginia. And it was probably the single most influential shift in my career because in PT school, you learn to not make things hurt or to try and not make them hurt. And in my new role as director of the biomechanics lab, we were trying to find out a number of questions, right? Some of those questions were funded by big groups like NIH and NIDR, trying to find out what causes fall risk issues, what causes issues with gait changes as we mature in our lifetime. Some of it was by DARPA, trying to find out kind of some special sauce as far as what works to improve readiness of the military and how we can make our soldiers as athletes, right, do better. So research, going down that research tangent was definitely made me think differently. I teach currently at Oregon State University in the PT program, and I'm always trying to get my students to try and be more objective by the way they approach problems. And I think that having a stint in the biomechanics lab makes you be objective, right? Like, I think all of us have talk to a PT or you've been to a PT yourself and the PT says, oh, when you do this thing, you kind of do this little wiggle thing. Like, that's not helpful, right? Like, what's helpful is being able to say, actually, well, I'm seeing you're here for some chronic issues at right knee pain. And I actually notice that you're overloading a certain aspect of your knee by, 13% every point in your stride, right? Like, those type of things are helpful, right? And then from there, we can sort of work backwards and find out what's actually causing these overuse injuries to begin with. And then more importantly, how do we actually put you in a position so you can optimize yourself so you don't keep getting hurt, right? Let's get off the hamster wheel and make yourself more durable and more resilient. And so that's been a big shift in the way I think career-wise. And, for the rest of my career, it's been basically, I kind of blur the lines between clinic and performance optimization, right? And I think that some people say, I'm not an elite. Do I need you? I'm like, if you move your body, you need to take care of it. Like, it's pretty much that simple. And I think that, we've seen a lot more people get involved and become interested in fitness over the years, and that's awesome. And it's not just about revving your heart rate, right? And so my mission is to make sure you can keep revving your heart rate, but keep yourself durable and keep yourself healthy so you can do the things that you love to do.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm kind of a late joiner to the athletic world, in the, as you put it earlier, the masters category. I like that. That sounds very important. But there's a tension that I feel all the time, which is wanting to make my best effort, putting out 100%, and then not getting hurt, right? So I know if I run too fast or do too much on the treadmill, and then the next day maybe I can't walk. So how do you advise people try and balance those two things?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I want to rev this back in terms of the problem is not you, meaning people who are listening. The problem is what our society has put out there as the goal, right? So we live in a society which is based upon volume and speed. That's all people care about, right? So you get your 10,000 steps or you don't, right? You ran, you know, 30 miles a week or you didn't, right? And I ran this fast or I ran slow, right? We're so obsessed with how much time we do things and how long it takes us. That's how we measure progress. And that is the single worst thing to obsess on at any level of sport, right? I care more about quality of what you do, not how much time you do it, right? And I know this runs a little bit counter because people say, oh, we just need people to get off the couch and start moving. And certainly, just please just move, right? And do things that you love and be active. But when it comes time to actually answer the questions you're asking, which is how do I really become, more durable, right? In the things I love to do, that's not just a more, a more question, right? It begs the question of what am I doing, right? So let's actually look at some of the stuff out there these days, right? So you will hear that as we age, we're told that our metabolism slows down and that we start to become more wobbly and that we start to lose muscle strength and we start to have all these changes in our gait, right? And we start to become more unstable. And yeah, that's true if you don't do anything, right? If you just let yourself age like a fine wine in isolation, those things will all happen. But it's 2024, everyone, and there is a metric ton of research out there which shows that yes, as you age, you will get weaker unless you work on strength training. And
Mm.
guess what? You can preserve lean muscle mass, and therefore you can preserve strength. And you can actually build strength, not just preserve. And therefore, a lot of the changes that we see, right, with oh, I'm becoming more wobbly and more unstable. Guess what? If you work on your stability, you won't become as wobbly and unstable. If you work on improving your power, guess what? You'll be able to have a better stride. So we talk about when you run faster, you get aches and pains. You need to prepare your body for the things that you want to do. And I think that's what gets lost in conversation. So I try and get people to step back and say, hey, look, I want you want to be active. I want you to be active. It's for health, for fitness, it's for looks, whatever the goals that you've got, right? It could be for race times. I want to help you find a better recipe, right? And it's not just about revving your engine. It's also about stabilizing and building a better chassis.
Yeah, I'll second that. I saw a paper recently where they had a group of older individuals, significantly older than me, by the way, who were doing some strength training. I don't know, lifting 5 pound weights or 10 pound weights, whatever it was they could handle. And it showed that they were able to significantly increase their muscle mass without really, it wasn't 5 hours a day in the gym. It was a reasonable workout, and it made a big difference to their overall health.
Totally. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of studies out there. I mean, men in their 90s have actually seen not just maintenance, but increases in lean body mass, which is muscle tissue. More muscle tissue can produce more force, means you can move easier, better, more efficiently. So, yeah, and it's just, I always tell people how can I help you? What are your goals, right? So, you may have been somebody who's, been a desk jockey for most of your career and you want to get out there and be active and do some things. And so, let's start somewhere, right? So you don't have to start with squatting 2 times your body weight, right? You can start with squatting maybe just as body weight, right? Maybe it's a 10 or 15 pound kettlebell, right? And we need to do things that are gradual and progressive because the body always adapts, right? And so, please do something, right? But I would just say that when you look at, okay, now I want to do something like run, like play basketball, like play pickleball, right? We've seen explosion in folks who've been previously sedentary. Like, for example, my mother-in-law, by the way, is somebody who is an art teacher. She's awesome. She's super active. She was never an athlete, right? She just competed in the Senior Olympics in pickleball last week, right? And so it's been funny to see her passion and her enjoyment take a different shift. She's loving this, right? But she's oh, she's pulling muscles and getting tendon strains right and left because she's never done anything like this before. And I'm like, hey, look, I want to keep playing pickleball too. let's make a little plan to work on some tendon health for you, right? Let's make a plan to put some strength training in. She's doing that now, right? And so it's, my point is, if you look at, I want to be able to do this, right? We just work backwards from there and find out what do we have to do to get you to a place where you can succeed in your goals.
All right, so let's seg directly into running rewired. What's that all about?
Yeah, so when I lived in this really weird spot for a long time in my career, right? So I was definitely stuck in this niche aspect of biomechanic analysis for a lot of running, but definitely a lot of endurance sports, looking at, what truly separates the best from the best, right? I've worked with recreational folks, world caliber folks, worked with over 50 different Olympians in my career. I've been on governing boards for different aspects of the sport as well. And so, what I found was there was not a good, approachable book for either clinicians who don't really understand running, because if you're a runner and you're a clinician, you think you're a running expert, you're not. Most people don't really understand what running asks of your body. And then a lot of runners who were kind of like, let's say, higher educated and want to know more. There was really no place for them to look at, how can I really improve myself outside of just, increase your heart rate, right? So Joe Friel is been a mentor of mine for years, and I love him to death. And Joe, I look at Joe handles the engine, right? So if you look at how do I improve my capacity to move my body faster, like Joe's your guy. I'm the guy you people call all the time when you basically say I can't move because I hurt myself, right? So I found there wasn't a good reference out there, and so I wanted to make something which was approachable as far as what you need to know as a runner, and then got solutions, right? So Running Rewired is written sort of two parts. It's got a lot of background info and like, hey, this is what running does to your body, right? You need to show up. It's quick little tangent. People say, oh, running's low loads applied for a long period of time. That's completely incorrect. It's very high loads applied for a long period of time, right? And so going back to what we said earlier in this talk, that you need to show up ready to do the things that you're asking your body to do. And we need to make sure that you're showing up with strong muscles, with robust tendons, durable bones, right? And solid ligaments. And the problem is, our society wants to make everything easy, right? And we loop everything under the world of, quote, strength training. And that's a big disservice to our body, because that's not how we get better. Okay. We get better by targeted training, right? There's this thing called Wolff's Law, which basically says the body applies or adapts based upon specific demands that it sees. And if you want to look at how do I optimize bone health, that's not the same thing as how do I build muscle strength. If I want to build muscle strength, it's not the same way to optimize tendon, right? And so I'm just going to say, as you with a goal, listening to whatever sport you love, might be running, might be something else, your responsibility as an athlete in your current situation is to take care of all those parts. Because if you don't, you're going to call me at some point in time and say you're hurt. I'm going to say, this is such a bummer. I know you're calling me the Thursday night before your pickleball competition or your race on Saturday morning. If we would have done a better job about preparing you for this over the long term, you wouldn't call me in a panic, right? And so that's the second part of the book, is trying to make actionable plans for folks to be able to improve all those parts specifically, right? And I'm a big fan of just show up for the test, right? When I teach my students, I'm like, look, this is what's on a test. Let's make sure you understand this. And I think that I try and use that same analogy for a sport, right? So this is your sport, great. What does your sport require of you? How can you break this down objectively? How can you prepare for each element on this list to make sure that you're ready and durable? And that's what I try to put in the book.
Wow, that's, I think it's great to break all that down, because I think most people say, well, gee, there's a marathon in 2 months. Maybe I'll do it, and run a little bit on the weekend, and then, send in the $70 and get a number, and off they go, without really deliberate, right, and
Right.
intentional preparation. All right, I got a little bit of an off the wall question though. There seems to be, I was kind of appalled the other day. My wife has actually gotten into sort of running 5K, and I think we're going to move up to a half marathon, is equipment. When I used to run in college, you just sort of grabbed, the Keds off the shelf and went running. And there was sort of a fad for thin shoes and light shoes. And then it went to sort of thicker shoes. But now they're selling, sort of running shoes for like $300. It was like, whoa. And it's like, does any of that matter? I mean, I don't want you to endorse a particular product or anything,
No, I'm not. No,
but
No, I do. I mean, full disclosure, I do product validation and innovation testing for 7 different shoe brands. I'm very much tied in this space where I live all the time. I would tell you that what I typically tell everybody, footwear does make a difference, but it makes a micro difference, right? When we look at running research on footwear, right? If I see changes in our biomechanics lab of like, 4, 5, 6, 7%, like we're pretty pumped. It's a pretty big change for looking at the influence of footwear. When I look at the influence of people, i.e., somebody who comes in with weaker feet versus stronger feet, better core control versus worse core control, better rotational hip stability versus poor hip stability, right? We see changes in magnitude of like 40, 50%, right? So, you know, we love shiny things. We love stuff we can just go buy and not have to do any work. And footwear does make a difference. And it's something anybody can do, right? Because all you need is your credit card. But it's much on the smaller end of the scale, okay? I always laugh. When your shoulder hurts, you don't blame your shirt, right? Yet when we have, running problems, people blame their shoes. Like, I'm sorry, your shoe is one part of it. You're a responsible adult. Take care of your body, right? The reason you're getting plantar fascia problems is not because anything's wrong with your plantar fascia. It's because you didn't show up with good, solid foot control and foot stability to offload the plantar fascia, which is not a muscle, right? That shouldn't take a bunch of stress. You should put stress through the tissues intended, but you don't do that because you don't have good control, because you have some balance and stability issues. So we have to build that. Then we have to progressively load tissue, right? We're always moving the needle in the right direction. So, again, what's a recipe to build that control? The reason your knees hurt when you run isn't because running's bad for you. It's because you've had a little bit of a micro limp for a long time that you ignored for 20 years at your desk job, and you're just getting to running, and you're starting to say, okay, well, how do I increase the volume and go from a 5K to a half marathon or a full marathon or an ultra or whatever, right? And more heart rate cycles is not the solution, right? Like, we have to look at the quality of your movement. You don't have very good control of mechanics of your knee joint complex, and that's why that joint's getting overloaded over and over again. And I don't care if you follow a dumb training plan or a smart training plan. The problem is the lack of control around your knee and not the fitness or intensity, right? So that's why it goes back to how do we prepare those parts for their job.
So the shoes are definitely the icing on the cake, it sounds
Totally.
like.
Icing. Yeah. But I would say, to answer your question simply, I would say that the vast majority of folks will do really well with a simple shoe, which is thin, firm, and light. I like thin, firm, and light shoes. You can feel the ground, right? It's a big issue because if you can't feel the ground, a lot of people kind of result to an overstride, which means their foot lands a little bit too far in front of their body, and that can overload joints more than landing closer to your body. People might have heard you have to land under your body when you run. You actually can't do that biomechanically unless you're accelerating. So don't use that advice. But you're gonna land pretty close to your body, as close to your body as you can for a given speed. Don't worry about if you land your heel or your midfoot or your forefoot. It doesn't matter. Okay. I would like running form is an issue for sure, and you want to basically pay attention to good postural integrity and postural control, right? But strengthen your parts. Build better tendons, right? Build better bones. You put better body into what you see, and you'll get great success at whatever shoes you decide to wear.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you for a practical tip, and you gave it to me. So that is fantastic. I'm sure there are many more in your book. So anything else you would like to add before we wrap up?
Yeah, I would say that this is the second edition of the book, by the way. So I first edition of the book was actually very successful, and we got lots of comments on some things as far as, hey, how do I make things a little more specific and more to me, right, to my needs? So there's a lot of stuff in there, context, and I try to build some sample scenarios out. I said, okay, here's a simple master's runner program. Here's a high school runner program. Here's a weekend warrior type program, right? But here's my call to action for everybody listening. What I want you to do, don't get an app, don't do anything fancy. I want you to go get a sheet of 8.5 by 11 paper. I just want you to draw a calendar grid, right? Just draw your horizontal and vertical lines and map out this month, okay? And all I want you to do in the simplest way possible, I want you to find 2 days each week on that calendar where you're going to tell yourself, I'm going to find 45 minutes to work on some aspect of stability, strength, balance, something, right? Aside from just, again, revving the needle in terms of quantity, and put the focus on quality, right? And so I want you to stick to that and try and be consistent. You will be shocked, blown away, surprised beyond belief at how much better you can make your body. Everybody listening has the capacity to get better, but we just don't put the time and attention. So make that little calendar, put it on your mirror, and I want you to look at it every day to know, oh, it's Tuesday. Tuesday, I said I was gonna give myself 45 minutes to work on some aspect. I've got all the plans in my book. Use them or go find something else. I don't care. I just want you to be, give your body the service and time it needs and follow some type of plan to be consistent.
Well, thanks for that, Jay Dicharry. Thanks for joining me on The Art of Medicine.
Thanks for having me.
Before we close, I'd like to give another thanks to our sponsor, locumstory.com, a resource where providers can get real, unbiased answers about locum tenens. I'm Dr. Andrew Wilner. See you next time. Before we close, I'd like to give another thanks to our sponsor, locumstory.com, a resource where providers can get real, unbiased answers about locum tenens. I'm Dr. Andrew Wilner. See you next time. This program is hosted, edited, and produced by Andrew Wilner, MD, FACP, FAAN. Guests receive no financial compensation for their appearance on The Art of Medicine. Andrew Wilner, MD, is Associate Professor of Neurology at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center, Memphis, Tennessee. Views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on this program belong solely to Dr. Wilner and his guests and not necessarily to their employers, organizations, or other group or individual. While this program intends to be informative, it is meant for entertainment purposes only. The Art of Medicine does not offer professional financial, legal, or medical advice. Dr. Wilner and his guests assume no responsibility or liability for any damages, financial or otherwise, that arise in connection with consuming this program's content. Thanks for watching. For more episodes of The Art of Medicine, please subscribe. www.andrewwilner.com